Hey, thanks for being here. It is another Audacy Check-In, which is pretty cool. My name's Jason Bailey, and I mean, this is like one of those things where it's 15 years in the making, right? It is the first new album from the Black Crowes, Happiness Bastards, which is set to release March 15th, and the new lead single, Wanting and Waiting. And we get the opportunity to spend some time with Chris Robinson. And Chris, let me tell you, the Black Crowes. I'm going to say this about the Black Crowes, and tell me if you can read my mind. One of the most interesting bands of a generation. Interesting bands of a generation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say in the same way that like people use the word interesting to describe like the times we're in, or you know what I mean? They're like, oh, you could we live in interesting times because of the chaos and madness and stuff. Yeah, I would say that's apropos.
Yeah, but I say that with a positive spin, and let me explain, is because of the roots. You know, as
No, I mean I'm just being self-deprecating. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean it's a wild. I mean you never know. And I tell that to young art, I'm lucky to work with a lot of young art. I have this record label and stuff, but that's what I always tell them. Like, you never know. You know what I mean? Like a few years ago, I never would have thought that Rich and I would have been, back in this band and making this music and being on a, just having the world of the Black Crows look and sound and feel the way it does today.
yeah, and interesting as a fan's perspective, and also a guy that spent some time in Georgia with the Atlanta roots. You know, you go back to the '80s, and a lot of people don't realize this, but believe it or not, in the South there in Atlanta, there was a thumping punk scene, and guys like William Duvall, lead singer Alice in Chains, came from that scene, and
Yeah,
then
I mean, we had, the Rich and I come from that. I saw him when his name was Kip, and he was the singer for Neon Christ.
right.
I mean, the guitar player for Neon Christ. Randy Dutel was the singer, but yeah, I mean, that's the. It's funny. We were just those kids that, we really weren't interested in mainstream things. And the DIY sort of the whole idea of like what and that was our there was a famous club in Atlanta called the 688 Club, and you still had I was always the year behind. Like when the drinking age went to 19, I turned 18, and then subsequent. So the all ages sort of hardcore scene, of course, it fit our disillusioned. We were just laughing that I'm a third generation Atlantan, and at a certain point in my dad and we had moved to Charlotte, and when we moved back to Atlanta, they decided to move to the suburbs instead of in the city.
Right.
But it was a petri dish of like, disenfranchised youth and this DIY aesthetic and looking for something different, something more visceral, something cerebral, something that would, again, take us away from what all the other kids were doing. And I think that, you know what I mean? Like, I think no matter what the Black Crows what we've ever done, there's still a strong sense of that in our attitude and our work.
Yeah, but the sound that you guys have, and again going back to what I was saying about interesting and the roots of where you guys came from, is then when you get into the '90s and what was happening was this college rock revolution. Again, Georgia-based bands like REM, Collective Soul, even Seven Dust, and
Well, driving and crying, we're
Driving
there.
Crying. And you guys are a part of that, but you stood out because of that sound. So, out of curiosity, Chris, like, how did you go from those influences locally to making a sound that still to this day no one's been able to replicate?
I mean, it's funny because the one thing I think is, again, about the Black Crows, it looks like one thing on paper, but then when you get into it, it's something completely different. And in the same way that, I think what the reality is we just really embraced the roots. as much as we loved a lot of the bands you named and a lot of the scenes that were going on, it's funny because like in the punk times, like we really gravitated toward X and the Gun Club and bands that had a little, X had like what we would call Americana in their music now. The Gun Club had like this sort of demented blues sort of take and slide guitars and things. And Rich and I's dad was a folk singer after his short-lived rock and roll career in the 50s. So I grew up, we grew up in a household with a lot of records, and whether it was Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs or Jimmy Reed or you know Otis Redding or who, whatever, we weren't afraid of those things, and we found a way to have those influences and side by side with all the other stuff, whether it was REM or Echo and the Bunnymen or like whatever we were into. Um, and it's funny because once we leaned into it, we found that it really worked. And there's the other part of it that a good song is a good song. A great song is a great song, and that's I think the voice, when I found my voice as a singer, it just added to like what we could do with that kind of music. I think having so much funk, R&B, blues, that's a big part of being in Atlanta, being adjacent to all this like African culture, and it just seeped into what we were interested in. Growing up, huge Parliament Funkadelic fan. One of the great bands of all time is from Atlanta, Mother's Finest. And, you only know Mother's Finest if you're from Atlanta or you live in Germany. And
Right.
but we weren't afraid to let that, and, by 1991, I always remember stepping out of this trailer at this gig we did. It was Black Crowes, Warrant, Metallica, Aerosmith at a baseball stadium in Rochester, New York. And like I had just gotten back from England, and I had my first like velvet bell bottoms and these like purple Chelsea boots. And like people were like pointing at me and laughing at us a little bit. And I was like, y'all laugh all you want. You know what I mean? Like Warrant came out, y'all look like the Osmond brothers. You know what I mean? Y'all look corny, man. Like y'all can make fun of me if you want. Uh, a year later, everyone in Vogue magazine is wearing velvet bell bottoms. You know what I mean? So we thought it was kind of punk to be that way. You know what I mean? Like the Rolling Stones in 1972 to us looked like the coolest people that ever descended upon planet Earth.
Yeah, you still got that y'all in you there, Chris. I like it.
Yeah, well, you can't get it out. You can try, but it's not gonna. Some stuff's not gonna leave.
You can take the South across the country, but you can't take the South against out of the guy.
I'm probably the only person with self-rising cornmeal and buttermilk in his refrigerator in Laurel Canyon.
15 years for this album, which, Black Crowes fans are sitting there going, okay, guys, patch it up. What are we doing? Let's go. This is the thing. We got to get it done because we're not getting any younger. Would you, or maybe behind the scenes, was there talks of possibly having this album titled Happiness Bastards out before 15 years?
No, I don't think so. You know what I mean? It's kind of we when we toured in 2010 was really the last Black Crowes tour. We went out in 2013 and in my cynical mind, the Contractual Obligation tour. I mean, things were pretty frayed at that point, and I think we had some good shows, but it took both my brother and I's sort of expedition into the wilderness, in our solo careers, just to kind of take the heat off the kettle, you know what I mean, and get into the world and see. We went from basically living in mom and dad's house to being rock stars in a few years. But we never really had any perspective, we never had any really time to untangle that. And both of our lives and, not being in each other's lives and not having the Black Crows. I mean, all the things that, for a long time, it just, I was like, wow, I didn't really know we would be back. But then things happen, a lot in your life, things happen. In my case, like meeting the love of my life after all these years and having this kind of new, having a partner in this, that could really, let me see things for what they are, to be able to heal my relationship with Rich. And he would say the same thing, I think. Um, to have the team of people we have around us. And then I think the most important thing was not doing any new music. Let's get this band back together. Let's get these people in on this, and let's hit the road, because that's where we've always, that's where it's the proving ground, if you will. And the Shake Your Moneymaker tour went on for 2 years, and that really was a huge impetus to where we are today, to rekindle this fire for like the real, what we feel is the real rock and roll spirit and sound that we wanted, and to really take our time and focus. There was no pressure really on us. Like, there was big pressure in 1992 after you sold 6 million records and you're 24 years old, 25 years old, to keep that going.
I'm sure.
30, almost 35 years later, again, I just, and it's funny, Rich and I, with all of our very public art fighting and nasty bitterness and stuff, whenever we write, and that's always been our kind of safe haven in a way. And I mean, we would fight in the studio and we'd fight on tour, but we never really fought in the room together with guitars and notebooks. And I think, of course, Rich was like, "You want to hear it? I have this," and I was like, "Okay, I have this, I have these lyrics or whatever." So that part was really easy, and I just think that's been the whole sort of thing that was lacking in the Black Crowes for many years. It's it's fun to be in this band. It's fun to be in the music business, and it's rewarding to write songs with my brother, and it's very natural.
Ironically enough, you and I are talking today, and I just reconnected with my brother as well after a very long period of time. And I was thinking about this, knowing that we were going to talk, and it was a weird feeling like nothing ever happened. Any of the issues that we had, one in particular, the big issue. And I'm wondering with you, when you get back in the studio, is it just like it's forgotten and we're moving forward? It's like riding a bike. The chemistry and the synergy is just automatically there.
Well, I think if you don't have that attitude, then you're just like mucking about in resentment and anger, and I don't think that, I don't think either of us or anyone around us would be interested in that. I mean, so yeah. And like I said, I think being on tour and getting it together, getting our feet under us, and getting this whole thing in a sense, the working order that we needed it to be, was the fertile ground to finally make this new record.
Mm-hmm.
But the process of that was really different for us too. We worked with this producer, Jay Joyce, we've never really worked with someone like Jay, and his studio in Nashville. And I mean, we made this record in 3 weeks, and I mean, not even 3 weeks. I mean, 2.5 weeks of work. And that's, you know what I mean? It all just kind of falls into place. We're very instinctive that way, and very visceral in the way, Rich and I are completely different human beings, but we both like to work, work fast and keep the energy going in the studio. I don't want to think too much. I want to feel.
Right. When you first, when the Black Crowes first disbanded and you go off and you do your solo stuff, just as Rich did, like, the Chris Robinson Brotherhood and New Earth Mud and stuff, that day that you either got on stage or you started recording music or went into a studio, was there a moment where you just kind of said to yourself, like, this doesn't feel right because it's not what the Black Crowes is and was? it's just not comfortable, or was it comfortable to go and do those solo projects?
Yeah, well, yeah, it wasn't I think a level of being comfortable. I mean, for me it was, can I well, I mean, I'm not I didn't really have a songwriting partner. It was me, like for the most part. I mean, my partner in the CRB was Neil Casal. So he would chip in occasionally with a middle eight or an idea, but for the most of that, I mean, I would say 85% of all of that music was I was responsible for. So and my presentation was so different, you know what I mean? It was like this kind of folky thing with like this more psychedelic sort of the vocal, it's completely different attitudes and ideas than what the Black Crows. I mean, I think part of, the Black Crows, we made so many different kinds of records, and after Southern Harmony, I don't think we really, I think we had touched on moments of like what I would consider like this kind of pure rock and roll, but we went off into all these other things. And that and so and I think that my solo career would have been an offshoot of like where my interest and ideas were going within the Black Crows. But the difference is now Rich and I are very much on the same, we know that Happiness Bastards, like we knew the day one in the studio, we want a very up tempo rock and roll record, big guitar riffs, the vocal style that I'm would be known for. And kind of you have to have, you have to have that, the idea has to be in place, you know what I mean? And then you breathe life into that idea, and then wow, there you are, So we were very focused on this material. And again, having a producer for the first time, we were really like, okay, if we're going to have a producer like this, let's don't get in our own way at all. And like, he's very successful, and he's made a lot of rock and roll records, a lot of big country records. He's a musician. Like, if we're gonna do it, we have to again, like I just said, get out of our own way and let this guy come in and listen to his ideas too. And it was really that work that couldn't have been better. You know what I mean? Because Rich does his thing, I do my thing, and Jay was doing his thing. We have great people in our band. You know what I mean? So I don't think we ever were in a situation where things were so harmonious in that way.
All right. Would you tee this new album, Happiness Bastards, up as a reflection of the past? I mean, you guys are coming up on a 40-year mark of the Black Crows, or the start of a new? Like, will we see more albums?
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with, I mean, yeah, of course it has something to do with the past because, it's a body of work, the song, we're songwriters, we're working artists, we're musicians. And, we've been doing this, like you said, through the 80s, 90s. I mean, the world changes quite a bit in 40 years, and whether you like it or not. And no, I see it completely as, I mean, I think we're focused on this, and this is what we're excited about. But yeah, I think this just opens up the opportunity for Rich and I, things, when Rich and I are together, or when Rich and I can work things out, and when we have a great team around us and people care about us, and you're just more, it's just the way it is that in our lives. And I think for a lot of people, we're just more checked in with how we're feeling, and respect for one another and our experiences, respect for, I mean, being like you were saying with your brother, we have a dual aspect to it, because yeah, we're family, but we also have this band that we dreamed up one day, you know what I mean, back in the 80s. And so, the responsibility lies for Rich and I to be brothers and be there for each other, and we know when that is working, then the band is better. You know what I mean? Everything is better. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? In our lives, and you're not alone. You know, and you have someone. There's, it's so funny because there's just something about, whether it's Mick and Keith or whether it's Stephen and Joe or Jimmy and Robert. I'm not comparing us to those bands, but we're family, Don and Phil Everly or whatever, or Noel and Liam. There's something about your partnership, the dynamic of that. And when it's good and when it's something is special, you should we should tend to that. We should let that grow. And I think we're more, of course, I just turned 57 years old.
You did, by the way. Happy birthday, by the
So,
way.
it's time to let some of the, that whatever your adolescent attitude, whatever, you know what I mean? This is time to enjoy this to the fullest.
For all those years that you two did not speak, did you have his number in your cell phone?
Yes.
Okay. So I asked Rich some years back that same question, and he said no. And I told him I didn't believe him.
Okay. Well, now we're fighting again because he's a liar.
Oh no! Don't let the dumb radio guy break up the Black Rose again.
Oh, no. He had my number. I don't care what he said. He might. Not,
I didn't believe him.
I'll tell you this: we didn't use the numbers, but he had my number. We still we lost our dad 11 years ago, but our mom is still kicking up a storm there in Nashville. So you know what I mean? We still have to take care of some familiar things, but no, but we didn't use that number. You know what I mean? We didn't speak, and that was a shame.
Yeah. Do you remember the first gig that you guys ever did and where it was?
Yeah, of course I do, because well, I mean, we'd played some parties and things like for kids at school, but the first gig that that was a gig in a club was it was this. I remember it because it was in a place called the Nucleus Club in Chattanooga, and it was the same day of Live Aid.
Wow.
So the rest of the world was watching. I never saw Live Aid because we were in a van driving to Chattanooga to open for a band from San Francisco that was called Yo. I still see their record occasionally at the used record store. We made $50. The guy paid us in a check, which I knew day one we shouldn't take a check. The check bounced, and it was wondrous. You know what I mean? I have such vivid memories of just the crackle of the PA with the first sound check we did. And that's something about that electricity in that stupid little black room at wherever we were in Chattanooga. No, like there were 8 people there, and 5 of them drove up with us.
I'm surprised it wasn't in Atlanta, and nobody. That wasn't your first gig that you guys did.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I don't know how it worked out, but yeah, the first show the first real sort of, we were called Mr. Crow's Garden, and it was in Chattanooga on the day everyone was watching Phil Collins play in every band.
Right. Yeah. Making movies about it. You guys are in Chattanooga.
We're opening with There She Goes Again by the Velvet Underground.
What about the first time that you heard the Black Crowes on the radio? Do you remember where you were then?
Yeah, I was here in Los Angeles. I don't remember who I was with. I was in a car. Jealous Again came on the radio, and it was rad. I can say y'all, and I say rad.
That's cool.
Immersed myself. I've lived in California longer than I've lived in Georgia, by the way, at this point in my life. No, it's special. It was super special. I mean, all those, especially radio, again, in 1990, 1989 or whatever, it was a different world,
Sure was. Yeah. I always think, with bands of the longevity of the Black Crowes and those stories and those memories, I would find it difficult if I were any of y'all to not sit back every once in a while and just go, God, that time, that was just so cool. And, and you celebrate this album, which, I've heard Wanting and Waiting, and it is a great track. It's a great lead track, especially for this album. And for Black Crowes fans, a lot of times bands that put out maybe an album, especially this much, the fans will say, well, it's not the sound I'm used to, but this is like a rejuvenated Black Crowes sound, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we really even had to discuss it. We knew what, doing playing Shake Your Moneymaker every night for a couple of years, really. At first it was daunting, and I was like, is that what I don't know what that was going to look like. You know what I mean? I didn't know. We went from a band that had 4,000 songs in its repertoire that never played the same set twice to playing the same thing. And I loved it. You know what I mean? And I really felt like, okay, I'm the front man of this band, and I'm a rare breed as well now. There's not a lot of sort of front men that do what I do in that in the classic sense, for lack of a
Sure.
So I loved it. I loved the energy. I loved getting back to, like I said, it's cliche, but it was like, if you're gonna do it, yeah, it has to, you know what I mean? If we're gonna sell rock and roll, we know rock and roll. And what we feel what is really rock and roll, not like some pop star who wears a guitar and gets on stage and people call that rock and roll. You know what I mean? That's like pop music, and that's cool, but it's not rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And we love rock and roll. You know what I mean? We love, we want to squeeze every little bit of rock and roll juice out of that thing before it's all over. And I think, you were asking me before, I think that's where we are today. And I think that's, that sort of paves the road to whatever happens in the future for us.
Do you think people always are saying, rock's dead, it's not this and it's not that. Do you think that the pure rock and roll that you're talking about right now is too far gone and will never get back to what you're referring to?
If you're talking about it in media sense, I can't answer, but I was just at Power Trip, and there are hundreds of thousands of people out to see Guns and AC/DC and Metallica. I just saw Queens of the Stone Age. I saw Green Day recently. Like, there's a lot of guitar-driven rock and roll stuff, and these shows are packed. Our shows are packed. I mean, it's hard to say rock and roll is dead when it's still such a big industry and it's still important in people's lives. And is it different? Is it take the same place? Is it a youth thing? Well, I'm not a youth anymore either. So, you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of components within it, but I think the reality is no. I mean, you can go to, not everything is streaming, or, you know what I mean? You can go to Amoeba in Hollywood and you're going to wait in line to pay for your records. You know what I mean? Because there's people in there buying records, and a lot of the records they're buying are rock and roll records, So I guess it would take some sort of, phenomenon or something for people in the media to look at it different. But, we live in a world where there's no music on TV anymore. You know what I mean? We live in a country where, the concert business is bigger than it's ever been, but you don't really see any live music on TV. There's not like where's Don Kirshner when you need him?
Right. Well, there's also, in my humble opinion, this resurgence. You mentioned the turnout to concerts, post-COVID, I think is helping because people, forgot how awesome it is to be outside and listen to live music. But, as a Gen Xer, and the Black Crowes being a Gen X-based band for the most part, is if you want to put into a generation, we now have kids. And as any parent does, they pass down to what they dug as far as music goes to their kids, and they're starting to bring their kids out to these concerts, which is cool.
Oh, of course. And I have my 14-year-old proudly wears her New York Dolls t-shirt to school. I'm like happy about that.
And you should. That's pretty cool. All right. Happiness Bastards is the new album from the Black Crowes. Like I said, this is the first album, 15 years, coming out March 15th, the lead single, Wanting and Waiting. It is Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes. Thank you so much for the time, my friend. And I again, outside of this radio thing, as a fan, just so excited that this is happening, because like 3, 4, 5 years ago, whenever I was talking to Rich, I didn't think it was, but now it is,
Yeah.
and it's
Well,
done.
thank you. Yeah, man, we're very excited about the whole thing, and just we're here to keep it rocking down the old road. You know what I mean? And thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, brother. Thank you so much, man. It was, like I said, first time meeting you. It was a pleasure. I'm a fan, marking out a little bit, but thank you.
Cheers, man. I appreciate it. Enjoy Sacktown.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.